Welcome, sleepy soul. Tonight I am your storyteller, your guide through shadows and whispers. Here in the dark corners of imagination, every creak, every shadow, and every whisper has a story to tell. Welcome to Creepytalks, where the night never ends and the tales are waiting for you. The first thing I noticed after my parents left was how quiet the house became. Not peaceful quiet, too quiet, like the walls were waiting for something. They drove off around noon that Saturday, off to my aunt's cabin upstate for her anniversary. I'd begged them to let me stay. "I'll be fine," I'd said. "It's just a week." Mom had hesitated, glancing toward the long hallway that led to the bedrooms. She never liked this house much, even though we'd lived here for nearly 5 years. "Lock the doors," she'd said. "All of them. Even the back one." "You know how the woods get at night," I laughed then. If only she knew. By evening, the house felt too big for one person. The air had that stale, heavy stillness that only happens when the heater isn't running and no one's talking. I made mac and cheese, watched a movie, and tried not to look at the windows, those tall black mirrors reflecting the living room back at me. Around 11, I started hearing it, a soft, irregular ticking sound, faint but steady. I muted the TV. Nothing. Then, tick, tick, tick. At first, I thought it was the old wall clock in the hallway, but that had stopped working months ago. The sound wasn't coming from one place either. It seemed to move, from the wall behind the couch to the ceiling above me, then to the kitchen. I told myself it was pipes. Houses make noises, wood expands, metal contracts, all that. Still, when I went to bed, I left the hallway light on. My room's at the end of the hall with a window facing the backyard and the tree line beyond. The glass always fogs slightly at night, no matter the season. I used to think it was just the air, but lately I've wondered if it's something else. Something breathing warm against the pane. That first night alone, I dreamed about water. Not the ocean, but something closer. Dark, shallow water pooling beneath floorboards. I heard it dripping, slow and rhythmic. And somewhere beneath that sound, a whisper too quiet to make out. When I woke up, the house was completely silent again. But there was something wrong with the silence. It wasn't empty. It was listening. By the third day, the noises had changed. Not ticking anymore. Now it was more like shifting. A soft drag, as if something small and dry were crawling inside the walls. It started while I was brushing my teeth that morning. The sound came from behind the bathroom mirror. Slow, deliberate. Shk, shk. "Probably a mouse," I said out loud, even though I didn't believe it. When I opened the cabinet behind the mirror, the noise stopped. Just bottles, toothpaste, cotton swabs. Nothing. Then the power flickered. Once, twice. The light hummed and went back to normal. For the rest of the morning, I kept catching glimpses of movement in my peripheral vision, just a shadow crossing a doorway, or a flicker of motion near the staircase. Every time I turned, there was nothing. By evening, I decided to check every door and window again, just to calm myself down. Front door? Locked. Back door? Locked. Garage door? Locked. But the basement door, the one at the far end of the kitchen, was unlatched. It shouldn't have been. That door always sticks, and I hadn't been down there since spring. When I opened it, a gust of cold, earthy air breathed up from the darkness below. It smelled of wet soil and rust. I reached for the light switch. Click. Nothing. I stood there a long time, staring down the steps. I could just barely make out the outline of the basement floor, the old boiler, a few cardboard boxes, and for a split second, I thought I saw something else, a shape crouched behind the water heater. I blinked and it was gone. That night, I slept in the living room, wrapped in a blanket on the couch, all the lights on. Around 2:30 a.m., I woke to the sound of footsteps, soft bare, coming down the hallway. I froze. The TV was off now, the air heavy and thick. The footsteps stopped just outside the living room. I couldn't see anyone, just the empty hallway lit by a single lamp. But I knew, as surely as I know my own heartbeat, that something was standing there, just beyond the frame of my vision. Then the air changed. It felt like the house exhaled, a slow, deep breath from the walls themselves, and with it came the faintest whisper, "You shouldn't be here alone." I didn't move until sunrise. When I finally worked up the courage to check the hallway, everything looked normal. But the floor by my bedroom door was wet, just a small puddle, glistening in the early light. I touched it. It smelled like iron. That was the first night the house spoke to me. It hasn't stopped since. I didn't tell anyone about the whisper. What was I supposed to say? "Hey, Mom, I think the house breathed on me last night." She'd laugh, or worse, she'd worry. So I kept it to myself. The puddle outside my bedroom dried by noon. The day looked almost normal. Bright sunlight poured through the kitchen windows, making the air feel safe again, like the night had been a bad dream that the morning erased. But it hadn't. I could still smell that faint metallic scent every time I passed the hallway. By afternoon, the power started flickering again. Short bursts this time, on, off, on. The fridge hummed and coughed. The TV turned itself on for half a second, static flaring across the screen before dying again. I checked the circuit box in the garage. Everything looked fine. That's when I heard it again. That soft, deliberate shh, shh, only louder now and closer. I followed it to the hallway. The sound came from the baseboard near my bedroom door, the same place where the puddle had been. I crouched down, pressed my ear to the wall. At first, nothing. Then, a faint, wet scratching, like fingernails dragging through mud. I jerked back, my heart hammered. The scratching stopped instantly, as if it had been listening too. The silence that followed was worse. I could hear my own breath echoing in the narrow hall. And then, tap, tap, tap. 3 slow knocks from the other side of the wall. I didn't sleep that night either. I stayed in the living room again, every lamp on, a baseball bat next to me just in case. The wind picked up around midnight, and I could hear it sighing through the chimney. That's when I noticed the air felt colder near the floor, like something was crawling beneath the house, displacing the warmth as it moved. I tried reading, but my eyes kept drifting toward the hallway, the place where the light didn't quite reach. It looked darker than it should have, as if the shadows there were thicker somehow. Around 3 a.m., I heard it again. Footsteps, slow, bare, wet. I held my breath. The sound came closer, one step at a time. I gripped the bat so tightly my palms ached. The footsteps reached the edge of the living room and stopped. The light flickered once, and I swear I saw a shape standing at the end of the hallway. Not clear, not solid, just a distortion, like heat rising from asphalt. Then in a voice softer than breath, it said, "You hear me now, don't you?" The lamps went out, all at once. I dropped the bat and scrambled for my phone, using the flashlight to slice through the dark. The hallway was empty. The shape was gone. But there were wet footprints on the floor, starting from my bedroom door and ending halfway down the hall. They didn't lead back. I didn't go to sleep until sunrise again. When I finally worked up the nerve to follow those footprints in daylight, they dried into faint, rusty outlines, like blood diluted with water. And then I noticed something else. The basement door was open again. The air down there was even colder than before. My breath came out in clouds as I peered down the steps. For a moment, I thought I heard water dripping. Then I realized it wasn't dripping. It was breathing. Soft, steady, wet, like something enormous was asleep beneath the house. I wanted to run. Every instinct screamed at me to run. But curiosity, or something darker, made me step down one stair, then another. The smell hit me halfway down. Earth, rust, something rotten. I reached the bottom, my phone light trembling in my hand. The beam fell across the boiler, the storage boxes, and something new. A door. It shouldn't have been there. A small wooden door built into the far wall, half hidden behind pipes and dust. It looked older than the rest of the basement, older than the house itself. There was no handle, just a faint gap, as if it had been pried open before and sealed again. I shone my light over it and froze. Scratched into the wood in uneven lines were words, greater than "don't listen." Something thumped behind the door. I stumbled back, tripped on a step, and barely caught myself. The sound came again, louder this time, like something hitting from the other side. Once, twice. Then a whisper crawling through the crack in the wood. Greater than, "let me finish talking." I ran. When I slammed the basement door shut, the whole house seemed to shudder. The lights flickered on again. The hum of the fridge returned. Everything looked normal. But I knew better. The knocking didn't stop immediately. It went on for hours. Slow, patient, like whatever was down there wasn't trying to escape. It was waiting for me to open the door again. After that night, the knocking finally stopped. At least I thought it did. But the quiet that followed wasn't the kind of quiet that means peace. It felt more like a pause, the kind that comes right before something speaks again. I tried to act normal that morning. I made coffee, opened the curtains, even played some music from my phone. The sunlight looked weak, pale. The trees in the backyard barely moved, though I could still hear wind. Not outside, but through the walls. I kept glancing toward the basement door. It looked perfectly ordinary now, shut tight, no sign of the wet footprints or the smell from before. Still, I couldn't shake the thought that if I blinked too long, it might open again. So I decided to stay upstairs all day. By late afternoon, I realized something strange. The clock on the stove said 4:12 p.m. The one on my phone said 2:46. I laughed a little. Maybe one of them had reset when the power flickered. But when I checked again 15 minutes later, both had changed. Now they said 6:01 and 3:20. And outside the window, the light hadn't moved at all. It was still that same dim gray, like the sun had been caught mid-descent and couldn't go any farther. I don't remember falling asleep, but suddenly it was dark again. The house lights were still on, too bright, almost humming, and there was a shadow under my bedroom door. At first I thought maybe I'd left a lamp on in the hallway, but then it moved, slowly, back and forth, like someone was pacing. I stood frozen, staring at the thin strip of light under the door, watching the dark shape slide across it again and again. Then it stopped, right in front of my room. Something pressed against the door from the other side. Not hard, just enough that I could see the wood flex slightly. hear the faint groan of the hinges. I whispered, "Who's there?" And something whispered back, greater than "not locked anymore." I ran to the door and yanked it open. Nothing. The hallway was empty, but the air felt charged, heavy, like the moment before a thunderstorm. I turned toward the kitchen. The lights there flickered once, twice, then everything went dark. When they came back on, the basement door was open again. I grabbed my phone, hands shaking, ready to call someone, anyone, but I froze when I saw the screen. The background had changed. It wasn't my home screen anymore. It was a picture, dark, grainy, of a door. Not the basement one, a different one, smaller, wooden, with the words scratched into it. Greater than "don't listen." The same words from the hidden door in the basement, except now there was something new written beneath them. Greater than "too late." The next few hours are a blur. I remember pacing, checking windows, trying to convince myself that maybe I'd taken the picture by accident. But how? I hadn't gone downstairs again. At some point, I noticed another change. The hallway was wrong. It was longer. The space between my bedroom and the living room had stretched somehow. An extra doorway where there hadn't been one before. The air there smelled faintly of damp earth and metal. I stepped closer. The floorboards creaked under my feet, groaning like they were straining against weight. Inside the new doorway was a small corridor I didn't recognize. The wallpaper was peeling, the light was flickering, and at the end of it stood another door. Locked. I reached for the handle, cold metal, slick with condensation. It didn't turn, but when I leaned in, I heard breathing on the other side. Slow, ragged, too deep to be human. Then, beneath the breath, a whisper I could almost make out. Greater than we built around it, I stumbled back, slamming into the wall. My pulse thundered in my ears. When I looked again, the new corridor was gone. Just the regular hallway. My house. But the air still smelled of rust and wet wood. I tried sleeping in my room again that night. I don't know why. Maybe because I wanted to prove the house couldn't win. Around midnight, I woke to a sound that made my blood run cold. A door creaking open, slowly, carefully. I couldn't tell which one. I just knew it wasn't mine. The sound moved down the hall, closer with each soft groan of hinges. Then a faint voice, the same one from before, breathless and wet. Greater than you opened the wrong one. Something touched the doorknob from the other side. Just a brush, a cold fingertip tracing the metal. I didn't move, didn't breathe. The knob turned halfway, stopped, then released almost gently. Footsteps retreated, and the house exhaled again. That slow, deep breath from the walls. But this time, when the air moved, I heard words inside it. I don't know how long I sat there after that. When the first light of morning crept in, I checked the hallway again. All the doors were open, even the ones that didn't exist yesterday. And behind one of them, just barely visible in the dark, I saw a reflection. Not in glass, not in a mirror. I stopped keeping track of the days. The clocks still didn't agree with each other, and every morning light looked the same gray as the night before. Sometimes my phone said Tuesday, sometimes Sunday. Once it showed 13:22 p.m. I didn't even react, just stared until the screen dimmed. That morning, or whatever passed for morning, the air felt wrong again. Damp, heavy, humming faintly. I switched on the radio in the kitchen, trying to fill the silence with something human. It found no stations, only a low hiss of static that pulsed like breathing. When I turned the dial, the hiss shaped itself into rhythm, almost words, A woman's voice, distant and warped. "Do you know how long you've been here?" I froze. The voice was mine. I yanked the plug from the wall. The noise stopped, but the echo of it stayed in the room, vibrating in the glassware. A second later, my phone buzzed. Voice memo recorded 009. I hadn't touched it. The playback was just static again, then a faint laugh, the kind you give when you realize something's watching you. It ended with a whisper that sounded almost amused. "You always talk to yourself down here." The house felt smaller that day, hallways narrowing, corners bending toward me. When I passed the living room mirror, my reflection lagged half a second behind. It blinked after I did. I tested it, waving one hand. Mine dropped first. The reflections kept moving, slower, smoother. Then it smiled. I didn't. The surface of the mirror rippled, just slightly, like breath on cold glass. A faint outline formed behind my reflection. Something tall, indistinct, leaning close as if to listen. When I spun around, the room was empty. By nightfall, the static had spread. Every screen, every speaker, even the pipes carried that thin electric buzz. Sometimes it swelled into voices, a man mumbling prayers, a child laughing, someone whispering my name. I started writing them down, just to prove I wasn't inventing it. Time words I heard: 2:14 a.m. Still awake, 3:03 a.m. Behind you, 4:19 a.m. She's remembering. The last one scared me most. She's remembering. Remembering what? I tried calling my parents again, but the line crackled and filled with that same wet breathing. Then a voice that wasn't either of them said quietly, "We never left." I threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall, screen shattering, and for a heartbeat the static stopped. Then, from the broken speaker, my own voice whispered, "You shouldn't have done that." That was when the power went out completely. Darkness rolled through the house like a tide. I groped for a flashlight, but the beam barely reached the far wall. In that thin circle of light, I saw photographs, ones I'd never taken, hung neatly where the wallpaper had been bare the night before. Every picture showed me, standing in different rooms of the house, sleeping, eating, staring directly at the camera. The last one was of me holding the flashlight, taken from just over my shoulder. I dropped it. The light spun on the floor, throwing wild shadows up the walls. In those shadows, faces bloomed and faded, half-formed, whispering, dissolving again. They weren't angry. They looked curious. And they all had my eyes. I pressed my palms to my ears, but the static came from inside now, fizzing behind my skull. Over the noise, a calm voice spoke. Mine again, but steadier, older somehow. "You keep calling this your house, but it called you first." When the lights flickered back, every picture was gone. Only the faint outlines of frames remained, like shadows burned into the paint. The air smelled of ozone and wet wood. I didn't sleep. I sat on the floor until dawn, or what passed for it, watching the static crawl across the broken TV screen. Every few seconds, a face appeared between the lines. Sometimes it was mine, sometimes it wasn't, and sometimes it smiled first. I don't remember falling asleep, but when I opened my eyes, I was already standing in the hallway. Every light in the house was on, burning too bright, throwing long white shadows that didn't match my body. The air was so thick it shimmered. The hum was louder now, a steady vibration that seemed to come from everywhere. The walls were moving. Not much, just the faintest rise and fall, as if the whole house were breathing in slow rhythm. In, out, in, out. Each time it exhaled, the air brushed my face like a whisper. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry. "Stop it," I managed. "Just stop." The hum deepened. The ceiling creaked, dust falling in soft clouds. The light bulbs flickered and dimmed until the house glowed the color of candle smoke. And then the breathing answered. "Greater than we can't. You left us here." I stumbled backward, pressing my palms against the wall. The surface was warm, pulsing faintly beneath my fingers, like skin over muscle. "What are you?" I whispered. The whisper came again, closer, clearer, multiple voices woven together, rising and falling like wind through pipes. "Greater than we are the memory you built around us. You tried to forget." The kitchen clock read 4:12 again. The same impossible time as before. The second hand ticked backward once, then stopped. Somewhere behind me, a door creaked open. The basement. I didn't want to go, but every breath the house took seemed to pull me toward it. The air tasted metallic, damp, like old coins and rain. At the top of the stairs, I hesitated, listening. Nothing moved below, but I could feel a faint vibration through the wooden steps, a heartbeat buried deep in the foundation. The flashlight flickered as I descended. The smell grew stronger, earth and rot, but beneath it something sweet, almost familiar. When I reached the bottom, the walls were covered in lines of dark growth, like roots crawling out from the corners. They pulsed with the same rhythm as the breathing above. The small wooden door was there again. This time, it stood half open. Inside, only darkness. I raised the light. The beam caught something on the floor, a pile of old photographs, their edges curling with damp. Each showed the same scene: the living room, the hall, the basement stairs. But there was always a figure in the background, blurred, faceless, watching. In the last photograph, the figure stood right where I was standing now, one hand on the open door. I turned slowly. The space beyond the door wasn't a room anymore. It was a void, black but not empty. The air shimmered inside it like heat above asphalt. Shapes moved in that shimmer, outlines of faces, hands, fragments of furniture floating in the dark. And beneath all of it, a low whispering chorus, repeating one word: greater than remember. I took one step closer. The air pulled at me, cool and heavy, like the tide drawing sand. Images flickered behind my eyes, flashes I didn't recognize but somehow knew. A construction site, a concrete foundation half buried in wet soil, men shouting, a woman's voice pleading, "Don't seal it yet. Listen, there's something." Then darkness again. My knees buckled. I grabbed the doorframe, heart hammering. The whisper rose, threads of voices overlapping. Greater than, they buried us in the walls. We can't stop breathing until you remember. I shook my head, backing away. I wasn't here. The air rushed outward as if the house itself sighed. Dust swirled in spirals around me, and for a moment the basement stretched wider, the floor bending downward like the inside of a lung. At the center of it, something shifted, a shape forming out of the dark, pale and indistinct. It looked almost human, but not quite solid, as if it were made of the same air that filled the house. It spoke in my own voice. Greater than, you were here. You were the first breath. The light flickered out. When I came to, I was lying on the living room floor. The house was still, every bulb cold. Sunlight, or something like it, spilled through the windows. For a long time I didn't move. I half expected to hear the breathing again, but the air was silent. On the wall opposite me, the paint had cracked in a long vertical line. The crack curved gently, almost like the outline of a sleeping face. I reached out to touch it. warm. I don't know what the house is now. Sometimes it hums softly at night, like someone murmuring in the next room. Sometimes the walls rise and fall again, faint and slow, keeping rhythm with my own breath. And sometimes when I whisper into the dark, I hear a voice answer. Mine, older, patient. It says greater than we remember. I don't feel alone anymore, but I don't think that's a good thing. For 2 days, the house stayed silent. No breathing, no whispers, not even the tick of the broken clock. It should have been a relief. Instead, the quiet pressed against my chest until I could hardly breathe on my own. I kept expecting the floor to shiver, for the walls to exhale again. When nothing happened, I began to think maybe it was over, that I'd imagined it, or dreamed too vividly. But on the third night, as I was falling asleep on the couch, someone knocked at the door. 3 slow, steady knocks. Exactly the way I'd heard them inside the wall that first week. I sat up listening. No wind, no footsteps outside, just the echo of that knocking, fading into the house's stillness. Then again, 3 knocks. Louder this time, but not angry, patient, deliberate, like a reminder. I whispered, "Who's there?" And the house whispered back, greater than let us in. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely turn the lock. When I opened the front door, the night outside looked wrong. There was the porch, the trees, the faint orange glow of the streetlight. But everything felt flat, like scenery painted onto glass. No sound, no wind. Even the air didn't move. Then I noticed a figure standing at the end of the walkway. Not close, not far. Just there, still, facing me. I could tell it was human-shaped, but every time I tried to focus, my eyes slipped away, like it was made of reflection instead of flesh. "Who are you?" I called. The voice that answered came from everywhere at once. The first breath, the last memory, opened the rest. The ground beneath me pulsed. A low, deep sound rolled through the foundation, a heartbeat I could feel in my teeth. Behind me, doors began opening by themselves. The bedroom, the bathroom, the hall closet, hinges creaking in perfect rhythm. One door stayed closed, the basement. I knew what it wanted. I knew what would happen if I listened, but standing there with the air vibrating and the walls swelling like lungs, I couldn't tell where my breath ended and the houses began. I turned and walked toward the basement. The door opened before I touched it. A cold wind rose from below, carrying whispers. Too many voices to separate, but all of them using my name. Greater than Mara. "Mara, we're still here." I descended slowly. At the bottom, the small wooden door stood wide this time, light spilling from the darkness beyond. It wasn't a void anymore. It was a room. The walls glistened like stone after rain. Roots crawled across the floor, pulsing faintly with light. And in the center sat a shape made of dust and shadow, breathing in perfect rhythm with the house above. When it lifted its head, I saw my own face. I don't know how long we looked at each other. The other me smiled, calm, almost kind. It spoke with my voice, but older, distant, like an echo through water. Greater than, you built this place from what you forgot. Every wall, every door. We stayed behind so you wouldn't have to remember. Remember what? I asked. Greater than that you never left. The roots trembled. The floor shuddered, and suddenly I saw flashes again. The construction site, the cracked foundation, the rain, the sound of collapsing wood, a woman shouting from below, me, and then silence, the house's first breath. I fell to my knees. I don't understand. The reflection leaned forward, the edges of its face dissolving into light. You became the walls so you could forget the noise, the dark, the water. But forgetting leaves space. We filled it. The light dimmed. The whispers rose again, circling the room. Greater than, breathe with us. I remember stepping forward. I remember the air thickening until it felt like I was breathing underwater. And then I remember nothing. Just a sound, low and endless, like wind caught in a hollow place. When I opened my eyes, I was back on the couch. Sunlight spilled through the windows. The house was quiet again. But when I exhaled, the walls moved with me. Now sometimes at night, I hear knocking. Not from outside, from inside the walls. 3 slow knocks, patient, rhythmic. I never answer anymore. It's not asking to come in. It's checking to see if I'm still here. Because I am. I always was. And when the house breathes, I breathe back.